TESOL Pop, Season 10, Episode 4.
Hello and welcome to TESOL Pop, the mini podcast for busy teachers. My name is Laura and joining me today to talk about learning strategies is author Rachael Harris. Rachael has taught ELT, literature and current affairs in primary and secondary schools in Geneva for over 15 years. Until recently, she was also the joint coordinator for Adaptable, Inclusive Practices and Sensig. She loves running, reading and learning and connecting with others like we're doing today at the Adaptable exhibition hall. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm so glad we can do this face to face.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking about Rachael's latest publication, which is Activities for Developing Learning Strategies. So we're going to go through what inspired her to author this, as well as a few examples taken from the book that you can apply and try in your classrooms. So let's get started. This is a gorgeous book, by the way. I love the fact that you've kind of coordinated with the TESOL Pop Pink.
Yes, it was pure hazard, but it works out pretty well. I'm glad to. So for the next book, you'll have to change colour.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
A whole rebrand. Yeah,
completely.
What inspired you to author this latest publication?
Well, I teach teens and young learners, and as we all see that we have students who get it quickly and students who don't.
Yeah.
And as with all teachers, I imagine, I want to help those that don't get it. So I've been looking at that. That's partly what got me into the inclusive practice special education needs SIG as well. And I saw that a lot of my students, and I teach in a secondary school, so I see this with my colleagues as well, is we have a tendency to say, okay, here's your vocab list, go off and learn it. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I do in my job as well is I sit in on their private study. So I would see them looking at this vocab list for 20 minutes, sort of as if it's going to, I don't know, metamorphose into their heads by rubbing it on their body or something. And they don't actually know how to learn. So then I started doing more of this in class and actually spending more time not teaching English, but teaching how to learn. And the more I've done that, the more I've obviously seen that the English picks up and they get better at it, but also they have more confidence, and it really helps those students who just don't get it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have a theory, I read somewhere that actually maybe gifted and talented students are actually just the ones that have the learning strategies and know how to put them into place.
Yeah, that would make sense.
So teaching those that don't have them, it's really what's brought up my whole class level.
And how wonderful that this is informed by your students. It's your students that have practically inspired you to research and author
Completely.
this.
I mean, every activity we've used in class many times. And actually, that's one of the joys of writing the book is some of the names in the activities are my students.
Oh, how lovely.
All of them. So they're really proud to say, oh, that's me. So that's brilliant. Yeah.
One of the things I was wondering before we dive into examples from here is that learning and learning strategies is such a huge umbrella term, and I know this is probably not the only book you'll publish potentially. This is me hopefully saying, because we could go down different avenues of learning. From, you mentioned vocabulary lists, like learning to recall something and use it within context, learning and developing skills further up that Bloom's taxonomy kind of pyramid. How did you approach this for this book in terms of like what learning is?
We definitely went more for learning strategies because, yes, you could write books this big on what learning is. They exist. So for us, we just went from the simple premises that learning is understand, recall, and being able to reproduce in different situations. And we didn't go much for it because, it's a huge subject.
And as a result, for teachers, this is a book that you can actually fit in your backpack and carry around.
You can carry it.
Practical.
There you go, yes. Yeah.
Let's dive into some of those activities then, those strategies and how teachers can now start
using
helping
them.
Their learners.
So for me, learning strategies have, first of all, there's two things. Learning strategies are like conscious actions, and they are teachable, which is good because otherwise there'd be no point being here and no point doing it. So conscious actions, at the beginning, they're more, I always compare it to like tying your shoelaces. So at the beginning, it's quite hard. You have to really practice and remember what you're doing. But then later, they do get more automatic. But they're still conscious actions. But learning strategies have been categorized in many ways. And for me, the one I find simplest is direct and indirect. So indirect strategies are things like goal setting, how to get back on track, developing a learner mindset. And they're things that maybe we use in our jobs as well, how to avoid procrastination, motivation, that kind of thing. And for me, they're just as important as the direct ones. And then direct learning strategies would be things like how to learn vocab, how to do a listening comprehension, that kind of thing. So, for example, an example of an indirect learning strategy would be at the beginning of the year or at New Year's Eve, we look at goal setting. So we break it down. We have these big, huge, hairy goals, really frightening things like you want to be an astronaut. Okay, so you've got your little thing, you want to be an astronaut. Then what do you need to do to be an astronaut? I need to study physics, I need to speak English, I need to be American to work in NASA. And then what do I need to do all that? And we just branch out until we have all these baby steps. And then your baby steps are actually actions you can do. So one of the things you can do is to learn English, you can play Wordle every day. To learn physics, you can read a science magazine, etc. And it breaks it down, and then they are the actions that the students can do and look at if they're doing them every week or not.
And these are when you mention indirect learning strategies, these are things that learners can apply across
completely
and beyond schooling.
Yes, completely, and in life. Many of the indirect ones I've learned a lot as well. It's really helped me organise my time, and especially your mentality. So one of the activities we have are quick wins. And you know, when you're feeling down, there's the slump, the dip. You're motivated, you started the gym, you've been 4 times, but then it's raining, you don't want to go, and you're in the dip. So let's work out 10 activities. And in class, we brainstorm quick wins. So that can be doing a crossword, it could be making a comment on social media in English, it could be watching a Netflix film, it can be contacting somebody, playing Wordle, what can we do? And we make a list of those quick wins, and then every week I will ask them, you know, what are you doing? What are your quick wins? Or if at the end of the lesson, it's a Friday afternoon, we're all like, blur, I'm like, go on then everybody, who can do 5 quick wins before the end of the lesson? And boom, 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 and it gets the motivation, it gets them feeling good about learning.
I love that. And just listening to that example there, I can imagine teachers, because as teachers we often need materials that we can do multiple things with. I can imagine doing that in the staff room with fellow teachers as well as with my students. So there's a lot of things that can be adapted for teacher training or just developmental scenarios as well as the classroom.
Yes, and I mean, so this was for the ELT classroom, but most of the activities can be used in other language situations or in other situations. And I've noticed my students use a lot of the things I teach them in history, in maths, in learning, not just other languages.
That's
so
fantastic.
One of the activities, one of the direct activities we look at is based on meta-analysis by Dunlosky et al. In 2013, and they basically studied all the different ways of learning vocab and then worked out which ones were the most efficient. So a lot of this comes back to my students who would sit there reading their sheet, and no, that is the least efficient way. The most efficient way is testing yourself, is regular spaced practice. So we all know it's better to learn 15 minutes every day and not 2 hours the day before the test. And then there's distributed practice, which is sharing it interleaving it with something else. So doing 15 minutes of English, then 15 minutes of German, then whatever else is actually more efficient. And then there's keyword mnemonics, or there's making imagery and all of that. And right at the bottom, there's highlighting and reading. And so one of the activities I do is I give them all these ideas and ask them to put them into order. And then I show them the scientific proof of what actually works and doesn't, and get them to practice it. And so they see for themselves.
You know, I wonder what impact you've seen this have on your own learners, because I think about some of the learners I've worked with before who just come to class who say, oh, miss, I'm just not good at, you know, the history or drama or English, whichever subject I'm wearing the hat for that day. And they've kind of, you know, written themselves off because they just don't have the learning strategies. Have you seen a transformation in your own learners?
Yes, completely. Completely, because also they compare themselves to others so much.
Yeah.
So first of all, there's that whole no point comparing yourself to the bilingual kids because their parents have been speaking them to in English, but even to the good learners. And this is one of the things I say to my students is it's a question of strategies, and you can become a good learner. And you really can, and the science has shown that if students are taught learning strategies earlier, that's what's going to help them most. There's a quote I love by Alvin Toffler, I believe, which is the illiterate people of today are not those that can't read and write. They are those that cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And this links in with what we sometimes hear students say, not in English class, but in maths or biology. When are we going to use that in life? What they need in life is the learning strategies, because it's true, what we teach them in school, they might not need. They won't necessarily do their first job for very long. They will change careers. We all talk about how the career they may end up in doesn't exist yet. So what they need to know is how to learn. And if we can teach them how to learn, we're giving them the key to the universe, basically.
That's absolutely wonderful and such an inspiring note to close today's conversation on. Thank you so much, Rachel. It's been lovely talking to you. I really appreciate it.
Love it. Thank you very much.
So if you'd like to grab yourself your own copy of Rachel's latest book, then you can go to the Delta Publishing website. There's also some free activities there for you to try out. I'm going to, as always, include those links in the show notes so you can find those easily. If you have a question or an idea that you'd like to pitch to the podcast, you can contact us on social media or the website tsopop.com. Finally, you can support what we do at TSOPOP in helping us record conversations just like this one today by leaving a rating and review wherever you listen to the podcast, by sharing this episode with your teaching community, or by even buying us a coffee at ko-fi.com/TSOPOP.